What is going on, everyone? Chris with Journals, Comics, and Pop Culture. Today, we are going to discuss market manipulation, and I'm going to talk about market manipulation in a way that I don't think has ever really been discussed before, because I'm going to be looking at it as not as market manipulation, but as market misinformation. Now, I'm going to explain what that means, but before we get into the video, if you aren't subscribed to the channel, please take some time to do so. As you can see right now, we're looking at coverprice.com. We're going to have a few different things on screen here to give you guys examples of what I'm talking about as we are discussing this issue today. So again, check out all the links below in the description as well, folks. Check out my official merch page if you want to become a channel member by clicking that join button below for only $1.99 a month. But let's just get into this video. Market manipulation is talked about constantly in the comic book hobby. A lot of it comes from the fact that there are books that reach a certain price point, and there's collectors or individuals out there that simply say, this isn't worth this much, there's no way, it's market manipulation. Or you get those that say, well, you get influencers like YouTubers that sell comics, and they're sitting on 30 copies of this dollar bin book, and they're talking it up on their channel just so they can flip it on eBay or now on the Whatnot app or things like that. Well, here's the thing. I've talked about this before. I don't see these things being huge reasons to why prices are the way they are. On the contrary, what I feel to be the issue is not purposeful manipulation, but misinformation. Now, whether that misinformation is on purpose or not, that's not really the argument here. The argument, though, is that there is a lot of misinformation out there, no matter why it's being put out there. And then, even more important, it's how us collectors and buyers, the consumers, are purchasing, and the decisions that we make with our purchasing dollars based on this misinformation. So we're going to discuss a few areas of misinformation and how you all could be smarter buyers and not affect the market to where fair market values get, in a sense, blown out of proportion, or to a number that where you guys think it should never be, this book should never be worth this much. All right, but I'm going to tell you right now, even with misinformation driving certain sales, it's still ultimately not manipulation. All right, we're being influenced by misinformation and organically making these purchasing decisions. That's why, instead of pointing fingers at certain individuals, oh, just because he's a YouTuber and sells comics, he's manipulating the market, or all these Whatnot sellers are manipulating the market, take responsibility in being an educated buyer. I'm going to stress this a lot for 2022. All right, let's take the first example. The first example of market misinformation and how it affects fair market value. And I recently talked about this in a video, and I'm going to talk about it again. And that is looking at outliers. How do we look at a fair market value of a book and then make a sound, educated decision to buy? And one thing that we need to be careful of is staying away from outliers, or staying away from the most recent sales, thinking that that dictates all. So I have on screen Punisher #1 of the first ongoing Punisher series. I'm going to show you guys something. So if you were in the market for this book, say you wanted to purchase this book in a 9.8, right? And say that you are, I don't know, maybe you're in a comic book forum on Facebook, or maybe you're watching certain YouTubers and you want to get information on this book and to say, well, what's a good price to pay for this book? Or should I buy this book right now? Or is it, is the book going up in the market? Is it going down in the market? Let's look at what it's been doing in 9.8s. And I'm going to point something out. I have this book out because there is a red flag. Let's look at all these 9.8 sales right here, folks. Most recently, we had a sale of $330 in January. This month, December, we have one for $355. We have one for $280, $338, $450, $345, $380. But then look at this, boom, $750. But then look what, and that was back in October. But then look at these other sales: $287, $387, $359, $359, $377. What do you see here? Well, every single sale is roughly in the same ballpark. It's somewhere around, it's in anywhere between 280 to 380. I mean, you could go back all the way to, even back in March of last year, looks like when it started picking steam. Because if you go back prior to that, you start seeing more lower numbers: 170, 235, 199, 176, 140. We're going to talk about two things here, folks. We're going to talk about why averages matter, and we're going to talk about outliers. I could sit here and make a video and say, this book has dropped, and I got my phone right here because we're gonna use the calculator because I want to use accurate numbers. Let's take the $750 sale, which again for me is a red flag. And let's look at the most recent. Let's just look at the most recent sale. I was gonna go to the most recent low sale, but let's just use the most recent sale of $330. So we're gonna see how much of a difference there is between the peak high and the current sale. So that's $750 minus $330, right? That's a $420 difference. And then you divide it by the original price, $750. And that's a 56% drop. So if I made a video and said, these key comics are dropping 56%, is that accurate? Absolutely not. Because I'm going to tell you right now, though I don't have any details about this book is an outlier that is a red flag. Because this book, Punisher #1, Volume 2 ongoing series, and a 9.8 was never worth $750. Now, look at certain variables. Maybe it was a newsstand, even then, because I can probably assure you that some of these are newsstands as well. We might be able to find more of these details in GPA, and I'm not using GPA right now, but that's okay, because my point still stands. This is an outlier. And if I was to sit here and deliver information to my viewers stating as such, this book has dropped over 50%, do not buy, it paints a very distorted and misleading picture of what this book is doing on the market. Okay, that's the first thing I want to make clear to you guys. That's why we cannot use outliers. That's one reason why we can't use outliers. But let's leave that $750 sale out and look at just these most recent sales right here. Going back to November, $345 to $450, down to $338, down to $280. Up to $350, back down to $330. So what is this book doing? If we looked at it on a chart, you'd see that it's going from, well, let's start at $380 back at the end of October, right? And then it goes to $345. So it goes down a little bit, but then it spikes up a decent amount to $450. But then it drops a good amount down to $338, and then even more down to $280. But then it comes decent amount back up to $355, and then a little drop to $330. So what is it, folks? Is this book cooled off because it hit $450 here and now is back down to $330? Is it spiking back up some because it was at $280 and then went up to $355 and then $330? Here's the point that I'm trying to make. None of these numbers is a fair market value, essentially, for this book. None of these numbers paint a real picture of if this book is increasing in value or decreasing in value. You want to know why? Because here's the thing, folks. These are a small sample size. With comic books, especially in 9.8 grades, there's not enough on the census to really have this steady value that speaks to supply and demand. This 280 could have been a sale that was ending in the middle of the night, and you might not have had, you might have only had a couple of people bidding on that book, and it kind of short sold. But not even a month later, you had one sell for, and let's look at the percentage of this. Let's look at 280 next to 355. What's the percentage difference? $75 difference, starting with the 280. That's a 27% increase. So when you look at it as a percentage, right, doesn't that seem like, wow, that book has increased a lot? But if you look back from the sale previous to 338, it had just decreased from the previous sale roughly 20%. So what's it doing here? Is it cooling off? Is it heating up? The bottom line is that each sale doesn't speak specifically to the fair market value, because this 355 sale, it could have been ending at 6 p.m. in the afternoon or in the evening, and there could have been just a couple of extra people sitting on that book, bidding on it on eBay at that specific time, having a little extra cash in their pocket saying, I want that a little bit more. That's why averages, computing rough fair market values, mean the most when you need to estimate what is a fair price that you want to pay for this book. So what am I doing right now? We're going to look at all the last sales from the last couple of months, which includes that peak 250 and the low 280, but we're not including that 750. That's 7 books. You know what the fair market value is when you add up the sales of all 7 books, divided by 7, and you get that average? $354. $354. That is a rough fair market value of what this book has been doing on the market for the last 3 months. So when you go to the Whatnot app, or you go to eBay, or you go to your local LCS, or you go to Facebook Marketplace, or you go to anybody selling this book in a 9.8, you have a rough idea of what this book has been selling for over the last few months. And if it's not a bidding war, right, and you're not bidding on a live auction, say somebody's asking $370 for the book, you could sit here and now say, okay, well, the rough fair market value average is $354. I could sit here and say that I know my budget is $340. I don't want to spend any more than $340. I could go to this guy that's selling it for what, $370, $375. I can make him an offer and say, are you willing to take $320? Now, clearly, this book has sold for under $320 once in the last few months, but it's been roughly over that, $338, $330, $345. So he can come back and he can counter $350. So you know what? Will you take $350? Well, that's right at the fair market value. You can even come back and say, well, how about $340? And he's like, nah, $350 is where I stop. You can say, okay, deal, sold. You see how you work, and you do your due diligence, and you make sound decisions. Now, if it is an auction and you're bidding, know your limit. Just know your limit. If you think this $354 is a fair market value, or you don't want to spend over $340, make that choice for yourself to where if it gets over that, you stop bidding. Let a couple other people that got money in their pocket bid it up. We have to be smarter buyers. And when we are, it's going to reflect a more proper fair market value in these sales that we could see. And guys, this cover price information is out there. GPA information is out there. It may cost you a couple dollars a month or so, but it's out there for you. eBay sold information is out there for you, and that's free. So this is the biggest thing I want you guys to understand, because every single book that's on the market is going to be similar to this. It's going to look similar to this. I mean, let's do another one. Let's do Amazing Spider-Man let's just do 252. Let's do the first appearance of the black suit. And let's just look at what this book is doing on the market. I mean, let's say 9.6. Let's do 9.6 and say you're in the market for it. We look at what's most recent sale: 579, 510, 576, 540, 530, 539, 516. I mean, look at this: 500, 500. It did hit 607, 699 here back in September, and then look at this: 743. So, look. Now, this book, I mean, if you did an estimate of last summer, there's a lot of $600 to $700. So this book has cooled off a little bit. But is it tanked or is it crashing? I mean, if you look back, I mean, look at what it was selling just a year ago. Way under what it's still selling for now. It's still more than doubled in value now. But it did peak like a lot of books did early last summer. And it's cooled off a little bit. But look, even if we take the most recent sale of 579 and subtract it from this previous sale right before that in December, 510, what's the percentage difference? It increased 14%. Okay, so, this book is booming on the market. No, you don't need to go off the 579 and say, oh, well, I need to pay 579 or even more because the book is booming. Look, it just sold for 14% more a couple days before the 510. It sold for 576. So what do? You add them all up, and you're going to find a rough average somewhere probably around, probably like 540. And that's going to be your rough fair market value that you could take and you can go out in the market, engage. So it's been roughly selling for an average of 540. This is the budget that I have. I'm willing to pay 525. Or I'm willing to hit that 579 mark. Shoot, maybe I do want it so bad that I'm willing to go even a little bit. I'm willing to go up to 600. But at least you're doing your due diligence and you're doing the proper work. You're not focused on outliers. You're not going to take an out or the highest of high sales at some point in time, compare it to the most recent low. You got to do your homework appropriately, okay? Now, let's shift gears here and talk more about misinformation that's out there. So I just came off of, I've been watching a lot of Whatnot shows. Now, don't get me wrong, I love Whatnot. I think everyone needs to be signed up for Whatnot if you're buying comics, to be quite honest. I started selling on Whatnot. I have an upcoming sale at the end of the month. Follow me there. Shameless plug at Journos Comics, no underscore. But here's the thing. I've been watching. There's a lot of great deals to be had on Whatnot. There's a lot of great buyers out there. But I've been just hanging out in some Whatnot live sales. And a huge thing that's going on is misinformation, simply because people don't know what they have. I saw somebody sell a Rocketeer book, a Rocketeer #1, and call it the first appearance of Rocketeer when Star Slayer #2, I believe, is the first appearance of Rocketeer in comics. They put the book up for sale and said, this is the first appearance of Rocketeer in comics. That was false. So if you guys are buyers and you're sitting there in that live sale, and you don't know no better, you might get that FOMO and you might start hitting bid on that book. This is where we have to be very careful. So was that person sitting there manipulating the market? I don't think so. I just think they had their information wrong. Another thing that you need to be aware of when you're on the Whatnot app is people are selling comics, folks, and they're going to talk you up. It's no difference if you go into an LCS or if you go into any company. And they're going to talk you up because they want you to buy products. So be very, very careful with the pitches that they're pitching out to you. And you don't got to take everything that these sellers say at face value. Take it with a grain of salt. But a lot of times, folks just don't know what they're selling. But they're gonna hey, that's a steal of a deal and all that stuff. And nobody's manipulating the market. They're selling you a product. How many of you have ever gone into a cell phone store? How many of you have ever gone into an electronics store? They're going to try to sell you up on the products, and it's just the nature of the free market and of the industry. So when you're going on to Whatnot, be smart. And I'm going to tell you right now, folks, there's a lot of negative talk about big sellers on Whatnot. These big sellers, maybe they have YouTube channels, maybe they have huge followings. And there's a lot of negative talk about them just because they're YouTubers and they're selling on Whatnot, manipulating the market. Let me tell you something. I've watched their shows and I've watched other people's shows that are maybe they're just dealers or retailers, or they own an LCS, or maybe they just have a small following. I have seen much more misinformation and much more used car salesmanship coming from people that I have that aren't YouTubers, that I know nothing about, and that have maybe they have an online store or an eBay store or an LCS. I from my experience of watching these YouTubers or these bigger name people, they know at least they know what they're talking about, and they're not feeding you BS. So if people are having FOMO in the sales, then that's on them. I told you guys, we as buyers need to take accountability for how we spend money. So it really comes down to a multitude of things where we as buyers have to hold ourselves accountable. Educate yourself before you go into the market. Okay? Educate yourself before you bid on eBay or you bid in a Whatnot sale. All right? When you watch YouTubers, ask them questions. Do your research after you watch a video. Just because your favorite YouTuber is saying this book is increasing or this book is decreasing, don't take it at face value. Do your own homework. Don't. And guys, this is how I really want to end this video. Stop focusing so much on outliers and high sales in the last sale, especially for graded books, especially for high grade books, especially for 9.8s. Just because the last sale of a book sold for $800 doesn't mean that you need to pay $800 for that book. Maybe the one that sold a week before it sold for $600. And maybe the next person that puts the 9.8 of that book on the market is willing to sell it for $600. Maybe they're willing to sell it for $550. You're never going to know if you simply look at Outliers or look at the last high sale and think that, oh, well, that's a fair market value and that's what I should pay. At the end of the day, we have to stop pointing fingers at everyone else and take responsibility for your own action. If you are getting information from YouTubers, hold them accountable to make sure that their information is valid, to make sure that where they're getting their numbers from is being delivered to you honestly. Data can be misleading. And if you're talking to a seller, if you're buying from a seller, communicate with that seller, work out deals, negotiate. There's always room for negotiating, and make sure you know your budget and you know your limit and you understand what fair market value is to you before you buy these books. When we start doing this, folks, the comic book market can absolutely reflect more healthy numbers that would essentially, in turn, help all of us out and help all of our pocketbooks out. That's my video for today, folks. Let me know if you have any thoughts. Leave those thoughts in the comments below. Questions, I'm always reading my comments. Thank you guys for watching. Be well, be smart in 2022. And until next time.